Okay. Is it working? This is going to be the first time that I am starting a scheduled, an officially scheduled live stream. So I just want to make sure that everything is working well. It looks like it is. So I have the display capture off. Let me go ahead and turn that back on. Okay, and then you can hear me? Yeah, it says that you can hear me. So let's go ahead and pull up the game and we can begin. So I did download League of Legends and I will be doing a stream of that later. But I figured for now let's go ahead and continue, and I was already planning on I already set a stream for this one. So let's do at least an hour of Lost Girl. And continue. Is the volume on? Oh. Do this mistake every time. Hold on. There we go. I just need to put my headset into the mic, which I forget to do that. Okay. Everything should be good. Need to pause it and restart? I can do that if I need to. 1 sec. Okay, I should just remember to do that next time. I'm gonna just. Okay. Alright, that should be working just fine. Let me just double check to make sure. Okay, alright, it looks like it is working. And can you hear me? Yep, it says that you can hear me. So I'm going to go ahead and let me switch this over just in case. And then I will turn on the display capture and then we can go ahead and begin. Okay. A little over a week passed without much incident. Serena spent a lot more time at home trying to study for an exam she knew she was all too unprepared for at the end of the week. Fortunately, due to the hours this week she spent in her room crying and giving herself a headache as she devoured her textbooks and notes, she was able to pass with a high B. A much higher grade than she expected. Between studying and going to classes, she really didn't have much time to spend on formulating her novel or going to the library. She did manage to formulate a bit more of an outline and potential synopsis, but writing it out, well, that was a different story. She did go to Labyrinth one evening after class, last Wednesday. But if she was being honest, it wasn't for any reason other than she was feeling lonely. After spending so much time with Layla lately, and then going for days without, I left her feeling quite alone and empty inside. She was so busy with school that she was able to keep herself occupied, but all the while she felt this pit inside of her that needed to be filled. If only to sit next to Layla, reading for a few hours. She managed to make it through the rest of the week without seeing Layla, attempting to focus on school and reading to help with inspiration for her novel, but she was getting rather antsy after not seeing her for a while. Where is she? She had made it to the park about 30 minutes early, and there was nothing there but shadowed trees and lit lamp posts. She heard a few crickets chirp in the early autumn breeze, the leaves beginning to change color and fall to their ultimate demise on the forest floor. Perhaps that's what her friendship with Layla would end up like. A leaf that grew off flourishing but would by the end up disintegrating into the ground. I didn't think you'd make it before me. Serena jumped at the sudden voice, holding a hand over her heart to steady it. She let out a deep breath, giving Layla a glare like shooting daggers. Now with both of them standing under the lamplight, she could see the apologetic look on the fox's face. Serena's face almost instantly softened. Sorry I made you wait. I didn't want to seem too eager. You've been pretty busy lately, and I didn't want to overwhelm you. I did show up early last time, after all. I still feel bad about that. Serena quickly shook her head. If anything, she'd be more upset if Layla was late than if she was early. Someone being late always led her to believe that the other wasn't showing up, and that she wasn't worth their time. And Serena didn't want that heartbreak. No, I was just worried that you wouldn't show up. That you were mad at me for not visiting you as much, or something. At this, Layla shook her head and chuckled. She didn't want to make light of the situation, but she did find it rather amusing that both of them were worried about the other being upset with them. Even Serena was able to smile at the silliness of it now, now that it was out in the open. I'm glad at least that we both did show up, and neither of us are actually mad at each other. Yeah, me too. The tenseness of the moment over, Layla nodded for the other and followed her to the park bench across from the grass. The bench was overshadowed by a canopy of large oak trees, the leaves falling from them leaving a blanket of autumn in their wake. The trees, though they were large and overshadowed each other, were spaced out so far that it felt like a ceiling of sky opened overhead. Where Serena could see easily now, a tapestry of stars glittered. This is what I wanted to show you. Wow. Both the fox and the rabbit sat down on the bench, about a foot apart with their necks craned up towards the sky. The moon was full and it glistened like a pearl in a sea of ink. And did your mother ever tell you that the craters on the moon look like a rabbit? Serena tilted her head as she looked up at the moon, pursing her lips in thought. Then after a few moments she smiled. Astronaut Bunny, Serena Star, and I never noticed that before. Oftentimes we are blind to what is around us, especially when it's about ourselves. Wait, your last name is Star? The bunny girl nodded, for neither was a fact that she could deny. She was often quite scatterbrained after all, and many things would remain hidden from her due to her inability to comprehend them in the moment. But she wanted to be able to look more closely at things, to see the things around her that she never noticed before. If she could do that, then perhaps the novel would just come to her. Just like the stars from his heart, the magician was able to weave into the night sky towards the end of The Starless Magician. Have you always been fond of stars? I suppose I never disliked them. But I've grown more attached to them over the last few years. And they're so far away. Most of them actually long dead by the time we see their lights. Yet they live on. And they watch over us. And we can still take in their beauty. It's a rather comforting thought, don't you think? Again, Serena nodded. But she found that she had more than she wanted to say about it. Oh, she found that she had more she wanted to say about it. But saying so, she realized, would open up a very personal, intense conversation. She hadn't known Layla very long, but she wanted to know more about her. She wanted to share herself with the other, to feel connected with someone like she never had before. But was that something that the other wanted? Or did Layla just want a friend that she could enjoy the happy moments with and ignore the bad ones? Do you often feel lonely? You know, without your parents? For a moment, Serena wondered if she'd upset the other with her intimate question. Then Layla let out a small, thoughtful exhale. It was light, much to Serena's relief. I suppose everyone does. Even those that are able to function more by themselves. It's human nature to want company from time to time. To want to reach out to someone and to see them reaching back. As she said that, the fox reached her outside hand towards the stars. They were thousands of light years away, but with how bright they were, it almost felt like you could reach out and touch them. And Serena did the same with her own hand. When the rabbit looked over at the other, a smile was plastered to Layla's lips, but the fox's gaze was solely on the sky. But what if no one reaches back? Layla's arm lowered back to her side, just as Serena said merely a few seconds before. She looked over at Serena, and that sweet and amazed smile still stitched to her lips. And she did what Serena never thought another person would do. She reached out her inner arm and took a hold of Serena's cold, frail one in her lap. Serena couldn't help but jump a bit in surprise. Well, you're reaching out, aren't you? For about the 5th time since they met that evening, Serena could hear herself thinking, she's right. Serena had reached out to Layla. She made sure to meet her at the library this week. She made sure to message her at least once a day to make sure that the other was okay. though she'd forgotten all about that up until this moment. And Layla had reached back. She had allowed the other to sit with her in the library, and she always messaged back as soon as she could. She'd even paid and given her a tour of the aquarium last week, which Serena could not forget about, even if she tried, as they both were still wearing their turtle hair clips in their hair. I am. The bunny took the fox's hand within her own and gave it a firm squeeze. She smiled at the other, glad for her sincerity and her warmth. More than anything, she realized that she wanted to be by Layla's side. To be with someone who understood and who reached out to her. To be able to reach out to someone when she needed it. And they both turned their heads towards the night sky and basked in its brilliance. Silently, they both promised that, just like the stars overhead, they would always reach out to one another and be a light for the other to gaze upon. Okay, let's save it here. Oh, don't overwrite it. Oh. Serena hesitantly stepped into her history class on Monday morning. The class that 2 weeks ago she had gotten called out in for spacing out and ridiculed by the Gossip Girls in the back of the room, before yelling and bolting out of the classroom with a panicked apology. Fortunately, the classes only met once a week, and she was able to get away with not having class last week because the teacher had called off sick. She wasn't much of a harsh language person, but she had cursed silently in her head right before she began her commute when she hadn't seen a message to cancel class. She really wasn't ready to face everyone, but she promised Layla that she wouldn't run away. She wasn't about to back out on that now. As soon as she walked in, her teacher immediately gave her a look which was riddled with mixed emotions. She inhaled and exhaled a deep breath. She didn't want to open the can of worms, but she needed to discuss this if she was going to continue and pass this class. You got this, Serena. She mumbled quietly to herself as she shakily walked up to his desk. He raised an eyebrow at her as she did, and a clear look of surprise was on his face. He definitely didn't expect someone as shy as Serena to approach him directly. May I help you, Miss Starr? Serena gulped and steadied her nerves. Yes, it's about class a couple of weeks ago. Oh, that. The middle-aged man set a stack of papers he was holding down onto his desk and leaned his fingers together over his mouth. He seemed like he was steadying himself for the conversation to follow, though he didn't say anything further until Serena spoke up. I think the music's getting a little louder, so I'm going to turn it down a bit. I don't do well in front of a lot of people. And I'd rather you not call me out in front of everyone. I just don't learn that way. It makes me too nervous, and I can't focus when I'm worried about everyone's eyes on me. The teacher lowered his hands. A look of guilt spread over his face. He let out a sigh and bowed his head. I'm sorry about that. I get quite upset when a student is not listening to my lectures. When I take the time to prepare them, and I suppose I was feeling a little under the weather that day. Serena had no idea what the teacher might also be going through at a hard time like this. If she was in the teacher's shoes and someone wasn't listening to her while she was talking, she wouldn't quite know what to do either. Especially if she wasn't feeling well. Serena shook her head and bowed her head in return. I'm sorry too. I was just a little antsy the other week. But I promise to do my best from here on out. At this, the teacher smiled and nodded his head. I expect great things from you, Miss Starr. Serena nodded, but she knew the conversation couldn't end there. She inhaled and exhaled another deep breath, and the teacher's smile faded as he soon realized that he was in for another hard discussion. It's about the girls, isn't it? So you heard them? Gossiping about me? Yes, they're quite an unusual trio. They're smart, always manage to keep up with schoolwork. But they like to gossip and spread rumors. I've heard it from more than one student. Then why don't you stop them? If only it was that simple. Their daughters, the high-ranking board members of the university. To talk badly about them is to anger the higher-ups, then I could lose my job. But that's not fair. The things they say, they need to be held responsible. I know. I'll do my best to speak with them. Miss Gage, Penn, and Thatcher, would you please come up to my desk? Serena looked shocked that the teacher would call on them so suddenly, but they all smiled graciously as they walked up towards his desk. Now, girls, I know you didn't mean any harm, but you've made Miss Starr quite upset with your words 2 weeks ago. As have I. I have already made amends, and I expect the same from you. I believe an apology is in order from each of you. We're sorry, sir. We didn't mean anything, honestly. We just got a little curious, since she's new here and all. Yeah, honest, and sorry. We're really sorry, Serena. Serena didn't know if the girls were actually telling the truth or not. But they seemed apologetic, and the teacher seemed to believe them, so Serena accepted their apologies with a nod of her head. Please don't let this happen again. Yes, sir. Thank you. Of course. With a relieved sigh, Serena made her way to her desk and slid into her seat. She was still shaking from the confrontation, as calm as it was, but she felt so much better now that it was over and dealt with. And the rest of the class went smoothly, with Serena paying as close attention as she could, and Serena felt that one conflict in her life had come to a close. At least she hoped so. Her dutiful attention during class was rewarded with a quiet dismissal from class, and seeing Layla's face as soon as she left the building. She had talked multiple times about being a college student with the other, so it wasn't a surprise that Layla knew where she was. as there was only one local university in Everton. It was quite a small university too, with only 3 main buildings. When she had met Layla at the library last, she mentioned that her history class was the largest one, telling her about the whole incident with her teacher and the Gossip Girls. Which Layla said to which Serena chuckled and quickly changed the subject. Layla, you're here! Although she was able to instantly figure out how the other had found her, and that it was quite easy, she was surprised that the other would have made such an effort to do so. Especially since after Layla had discussed when they planned to meet at the convenience store, that she lived an extra 10-minute walk in the other direction from her school. Serena rushed down the stairs to greet her, a broad smile on her face. Layla's face, which seemed to have been lost in thought, instantly brightened upon seeing Serena so pleasantly surprised, right in front of her. I would have done this sooner had I known you'd react like that. At this, Serena chuckled again. Her cheeks lit up pink, and she dipped her head down to hide them. She playfully hit Layla softly in the arm. I must be pretty important for you to go out of your way to wait for me. For you, Princess Star, I'm willing to go the distance. Serena rolled her eyes, though she was secretly flattered. Not only for the fact that the other went out of her way to meet up with her here, but also for the fact that Layla really did make it sound and feel like she was a real-life princess. Even though she was far from it in reality. If you're ready, I will escort you to our weekly destination. Whatever, skip that part. Anyone can be a princess that wants to be a princess. Whatever, she can be a princess. Serena chuckled again when Layla held out an arm. Instantly, with a bright grin on her face, she linked her arms in Layla's. She linked hers around Layla's, and literally arm in arm, they made their way to their next destination. The Bunny and the Fox had found a booth in a cozy corner of the Rose Garden Cafe, the most famous shop in Everton. Even at sunset, nearly dark, there were quite a few people here, with almost half of the booths and tables occupied. Due to the influx in business, the cafe had extended their hours till very late into the night to appease their late night students' caffeine cravings. A fact that, as Layla pointed out, meant they had plenty of time to chat if they wanted to. I can't believe after being here for nearly 2 months you haven't even been to this place. A month and a half. And I meant to come here, just got busy. At that, the fox simply shrugged. It's not as if she'd come here to cross-examine Serena. Anyways. Though, like Serena herself, she did want to learn more about the other, and soak up as much of their time together as she could. Both of them picked up their cups, one a cup and saucer and the other a mug, and took a sip of the drinks they ordered. That's the best tea I've ever had, Serena exclaimed, looking surprised into the teacup. She had ordered a French vanilla chai, and the mix of sugar and spice in her cup melted into her mouth and warmed up every chilled bone from the outside autumn wind. It was, Serena thought to herself, rather amusingly made of sugar and spice, and everything nice. So, you're more of a tea drinker. Serena instantly nodded. My parents didn't want me getting addicted to caffeine. Rabbits are a bit rambunctious if they get too much caffeine, or sugar, or chocolate. In her head, the fox imagined a small bunch of bunny toddlers literally jumping around all over the place. She definitely couldn't blame Serena's parents for that. I wouldn't have guessed, though, that your preference is hot chocolate. I figured you'd go for black coffee. Am I that much of a Scrooge? Or did you say that because you think I act mature for my age? Serena laughed. They talked about their ages before. On one of the first days in the labyrinth when they first met. Serena had just turned 19 in the spring, and Layla would turn 22 next month in mid-October. You're 3 years older than me. You're miles more mature. I don't know about that. You're more mature when it comes to life decisions. I just sit in the basement all day reading other people's stories. I don't make anything out of my own. What started off as a light-hearted instantly turned into something much darker, and Layla bit her lip as she sighed. I'm sorry. This is supposed to be a happy occasion, and yet I always ruin it with my negativity. Serena instantly shook her head, as she always did when Layla was trying to bring herself down. The bunny, after 2 weeks, still didn't understand why the other was fighting so hard to prove herself as a terrible person. All Serena could see was the best sort of person, even if she did have a dark past or present. I don't know what you're going through, what you've been through, but you're a great person, Layla. You've helped me so much. And I know you are, and can be more than you think you are. And perhaps I can help you do that. For a moment, Layla looked stunned. She stared at Serena, then down into her own cup. She sighed again, completely perplexed as to what she should say. I'm truly not trying to be negative, but I guess I just don't see myself the way that you do. I see someone wasting their life, just trying to fill an empty void. And I don't really see a future for someone like that. That's not true. You're not just wasting your life. You're not wasting your life. You're spending it with books and with other stories. With me. Your life is far from empty. Well, it has gotten much brighter since you've been around. Much lighter. Across the table, Serena smiled. And she saw the hint of a smile from Layla too. But she could also she could also tell that there was a darkness in Layla. It hadn't quite worked its way out yet. A darkness that terrified her for what it might do to the both of them. Well, I suppose it's about time I told you. Before you've managed to find it out, anyway. The fox set her lifted mug onto the marble table and looked down into its warm chocolate contents. She didn't raise her eyes to meet Serena's all the while she talked. Serena sat with her fingers wrapped tightly around her cup, as if frozen in place as she listened to the other. I never was much good at making friends. This is probably the longest one I've ever had, if you can believe it. You could say, locked away from the world as a child. My parents did it to protect me, because they knew the dangers I could face outside the estate's walls. Because my parents have a lot of enemies. Enemies in business, you see. Serena tilted her head, completely confused as to what Layla was getting at. Serena had lived a boisterous life with her family in a small farmhouse in the countryside. She had never seen a place that one could call an estate. She spent most of her days outside, working on gardens and playing with her little brothers in the fields. Though when she had free time, she would stay inside and read for as long as she could. She couldn't remember having an enemy either, except the weather, which was always, as her mother said, unpredictable like a rebellious teenager. Can I trust you, Serena, to keep this secret? Layla's bronze and tense eyes stared into the other's. But it wasn't in anger or insistence. It was in desperation. It was like she was begging Serena to trust her, to listen to her to the end, without judgment. With total sincerity and openness, Serena nodded. So Layla continued with a small nod, her face overshadowed by the citrine light figure above their heads. I grew up in an estate, what someone from here or the country would probably call a mansion. Though estates actually have a considerably larger amount of land, gardens and such. And well, anyways. My parents, the Raylands, forced me to stay inside the estate's manor at all times. And they're quite wealthy, and lots of people would have liked to get a hand on any of their assets. So they locked up their biggest asset, their only child, inside their home and left her behind to go on numerous overseas business tours and adventures. Left her to be protected by only maids and gardeners. Serena now could definitely imagine the loneliness Layla must have felt, being locked up inside a giant house for so long. Serena herself couldn't even imagine a house that large, let alone living in a house that large without her family. And she understood too why Layla wanted to go on adventures, which her parents had left her out of growing up. But adventures, Serena knew, were definitely no fun alone. I don't tell people I'm the Raylan's heir, because you never know who you can trust. Once they know you're the heir to a millionaire, well, most people try to milk you for all you're worth. And if they don't, then they run away, scared of being involved with someone of such a high upbringing. and what it could mean to them. They see you as a title, not as a person. The story Layla was telling her was heartbreaking. She couldn't imagine all the times Layla had tried to reach out to people, how many times people ran from her or betrayed her trust. All because of her parents. The one fact that she couldn't control. I began to alienate from people after a while, tired of being abused and left behind. Once I became a full-grown adult, nothing bad had happened to me. My parents had allowed me to basically do whatever I wanted, assuming it wouldn't look bad upon their enterprise. But I have no idea what I can do, and what I should do. How am I supposed to make a choice when all of my choices have already been made for me? How am I supposed to live for myself? I'm surrounded by everything, and yet I'm empty. And I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to run from me too. Serena could feel her heart breaking for the other. This girl who she had only known for 2 weeks, and yet felt as if she was glued to her. She didn't want to imagine a life without Layla in it.